Hi, I'm Chris Petersen, CEO of RADICL. RADICL is on a mission to bring high-value targets in the defense industrial base, a superior class of cyber threat protection. Today, we are talking about CMMC and the state of CMMC, as many should have come to understand, was created to guide and ensure companies achieve a baseline level of cyber threat maturity and capability. And we are joined today by 5 experts, who can speak about CMMC, why it was originated, how it might evolve, and the impact on businesses in the DIB as they look forward in terms of how they should be planning to address the impact of CMMC on their business. And so I thought we would start by having our panel introduce themselves. So maybe everybody maybe introduce yourselves, where you're from, and maybe a bit, why you care about CMMC.
Sure, I guess I'll go first. My name is Regan Edens, and I am the Chief Compliance Officer for DTC Global. And I've spent my lifetime in service to my nation, and certainly CMMC is no exception to that. I'm very fortunate enough to serve in as the chairman of the CMMC Industry Standards Council, and have been a part of the inception of the Cyber AB and the building of this ecosystem, along with Matt Titcombe as well. And very fortunate enough to have sort of done the long march in helping to establish these requirements, and now we see them coming to fruition right before our eyes.
Thanks, Regan. Alex, how about you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate being included in this panel. I'm Alex Whitworth. I'm a sales director at Carahsoft, and one of my roles with Carahsoft is leading our CMMC vertical for the company. So me and a few other folks here on the Carahsoft side have been studying CMMC, for a long time, the trends we're seeing in industry, policy coming from DoD, new technology coming onto the market, talking with customers, really since the beginning of the program. So very exciting time for CMMC, and I'm really glad to be here.
Thanks, Alex. Matt?
Well, I'm Matt Titcombe. I'm the CEO of Peak InfoSec. Sorry, I was in Boston earlier this week and caught a little bit of a throat cold, so feel like I'm going through puberty again today. So we're an authorized C3PO, and we're on that edge now of everybody reaching out to get their certifications through. So we're kind of having a fun, crazy time right now, as this is suddenly out of the gates sooner and faster than we all expected.
Yeah. Scott.
All right. So Scott McDaniel, CEO of Simple Helix. We are a managed service provider in Huntsville, Alabama. We also own and operate our own military spec data center here in Huntsville as well. Obviously, Huntsville is a DoD-centric town, and we have been following CMMC since version 0.4. And obviously want to support not only our city, but also our nation on this journey to become more cyber aware and secure as we go into the future.
Thanks, Scott. And we're very honored and pleased to also have joining us General Carlisle.
Hey, thanks, Chris. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this and kind of help and get perspectives. I spent 39 years in the Air Force. The last 3 jobs I was the operations deputy for the United States Air Force and commander of Pacific Air Forces, and then commander of Air Combat Command at Langley Air Force Base. So I think my perspective, first of all, comes from my military time and the incredible threat that we face every day. I make a joke about it, but when I was a commander of the Pacific Air Forces, the Chinese dubbed me the hegemon of the Pacific and started creating every kind of cyber attack on me personally that you can imagine. And obviously I had to continue to go back to OSI to try to kill it. And there was friends of mine who called me and said, I heard you're divorced or you're dead or what. I mean, it was amazing. And then in the time that after I got out, I spent a little over 5 years as president and CEO of the National Defense Industrial Association. Really spent a lot of time understanding the industry's perspective and what DoD needs to do to help industry and what industry needs to do to help DoD. CMMC has been critical part of this. We know that the threat is giant out there, so the opportunity to be on this panel and help discuss the way industry, the defense industrial base industry, and the United States government can work together, because the threat's on the ground. I think everybody knows that. So it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be part of this. And Chris, I appreciate it, and appreciate everything RADICL's doing to move the country forward.
Thank you, General. And thanks to all of you for participating today. I'm sure our guests will appreciate all the insights you share. Well, let's dive in and let's talk about the strategic importance of CMMC. First question I'll put out there to the panel is, why does CMMC matter now from a geopolitical perspective, technological advancement perspective, and just the general increasing cyber threat landscape? Anybody care to opine on this question?
If I don't mind starting, if that's okay. So yeah. I think the reason CMMC is so important is cyber is a domain that's become an asymmetric advantage for different countries that are good at it. It also levels the playing field in many ways, where before size and might and numbers were big players. Cyber can negate a lot of that. Both in the information technologies, operational technology, both IT and OT. So I think the importance of CMMC in a strategic role is it is a domain that levels the playing field with different, whether it's criminal element or a non-nation state or a nation state. And we've seen it across the board. So strategically, I think DoD said, this can't be a pickup game. This can't be a, 1,000 handmade wooden shoes. We've got to get our arms around this threat, this domain. We've got to dominate this domain if we're going to continue to maintain the national security of our nation. And CMMC is kind of the first start. The reason, it's been a while, right? We've been working on CMMC for quite a while. We've had some ups and downs. It's hard. It is really, really hard. And, that's, again, I'll go back to one of the things RADICL brings to the fight is technology and capability that starts to get after some of the really difficult problems and how you defend both your operational networks, your OT, as well as your information technology and your information that an adversary we know will exploit to their advantage, both in the competition phase and the conflict phase.
Yeah, to just amplify General Carlisle's comments, managing our risk in our supply chain is got to be the greatest priority that we've ever faced in really contrast to the most and ubiquitous existential threat that we've ever faced as a nation. You wish that these things were hyperbole, but they're not. And when you talk about intellectual property value transfer of some estimated $900 billion a year, the CMMC matters. And I think I agree with General Carlisle. This is, I've made a career of doing very hard things that most people simply will not do. And this is no less than that, in the sense that how do we mobilize the DoD, Defense Industrial Base, all of the tier suppliers, mobilize to defend this data and protect this data, and do it in a way that's consistent, and do it in a way that's really takes American industry to the next level in terms of cyber resilience. So I think that it's timely, it is difficult, and I think that the value of that to our survival as a nation can't really be understated, in my humble opinion.
Well said. Couldn't agree more. Personally, I got into, I started logarithm back in 2002 because I was convinced, that companies back then were deeply compromised and didn't know it. And I would say, where we are at CMMC today, it's both encouraging and also concerning. That was 20 years ago. And we're still just getting to the point of requiring a baseline level of security for companies holding important secrets and serving important operations. So, given CMMC's purpose, how will CMMC improve the cybersecurity posture, of companies in the DIB? How will it have an impact?
I'll jump in as the evil auditor and assessor in this one. Unfortunately, the reality is the requirement's been there for everybody to be implementing this. all the way back since the start of 2017 when the original DFAR 7012 came out and nobody did. We all played by the game of eligibility. You got an SSP, you got a POEM, and someday in the future, you'll get compliant. Well, DoD said that's not working and it's time to enforce this. And it's kind of, they were nice and generous, and they're still being nice and generous underneath the new rule about time for the children to behave. And that's really what this is going to bring, is now that third-party validation and inspection that all the companies that have got the government's intellectual property and are protecting it are actually doing what they should be doing. And to the general's point, Reagan's point, it's so easy. It's script kiddies all the way up through nation states are targeting everybody. I mean, there's really no distinction in this. And so if you don't have your guard up and you're ready for it, whether it's a script kiddie or nation state, you could find yourself hacked.
Yeah, that's a great point. I couldn't agree more. And, the other thing I believe that CMMC the government's trying to do, and this is where RADICL, I think, is moving exactly in the right direction. And that is, there's an economies of scale to this, in the fact that if you have access to more information of more threat actors and where they're coming from and the techniques they're using and how they're doing it, the more information you have, you can get ahead of things at least. I mean, they'll continue to evolve, they'll continue to get better. But if you look at some of the work that RADICL's done, what DC3 tries to do, where you pick out and you find a threat actor and you let a cohort know, hey, this happened, here's the technique, here's how you recognize it, and here's how you defeat it. And so I think, CMM, you're right, in this 800 series, 171, 170, it's been out there. You have to protect this stuff. But at the end of the day, it was kind of a pickup game. It was, okay, let's do that. But now the idea that, again, this is one of the values of RADICL, especially with the mid and smaller companies, where you don't have the throw weight of the bigs or the big mids, but you can now get more bang for your buck because you got a multiple levels of data that are coming in on threat actors and what they're doing and how they're doing it, and you'll be early on in the game and you'll be able to counter it. The greatest travesty is somebody goes, hey, our network's been infiltrated, and they've exfiltrated X terabytes worth of data. And you go, oh yeah, when did this happen? 3 months ago. That's the kind of thing that we got to get away from. We got to be able to find it, figure it out. They're going to continue to hit the networks and try to gain access and gain information, exfiltrate data. The sooner we know, the better we can counter it, the better we can stop that exfiltration. So I do think CMMC is an intent to try to get to some economies of scale, so we share information, we understand where the threat actors are coming from, the techniques they're using, and then how to stop them.
Yeah, do you think, I'm certainly seeing it in my, compliance without enforcement, without independent audit, and ultimately a commercial penalty, security just often gets kicked down the road. And I think that's, where we've been with the kind of current, DFARS clauses and NIST is there isn't any, not strong, there's not strong enough enforcement nor a real commercial penalty that then, frees up the budget required to actually invest in cybersecurity. It is expensive. It requires resources, an allocation of budget. So maybe the next question, the final rule did just drop. What's the impact of this? What's this mean for the industry?
Well, I think that what we have is we've had an ecosystem maturing over the last really 5-6 years, and we have technology and technology providers, people like Scott's amazing team at Simple Helix, Huntsville, and Peak InfoSec with Matt, that have really invested in understanding these requirements and really bringing all of the pieces of the puzzle together, because the CMC rule is as detailed as you could have possibly imagined. It went from 234 pages to about 471. It provides a level of detail and a level of focus that takes those folks that process, store, transmit CUI, that receive it, that develop it in performance of their contracts. It requires them to meet requirements for all of the networks that are in scope and that process, store, and transmit CUI. It brings a level of complexity in the engagement between those external service providers that help provide security and those that provide cloud services. And it sort of brings it all together, and there's no escape. There are very little areas of wiggle room between the contract clause, the 7021 contract clause update, and the CMC rule. And the time to pay the piper is right on us, And I think that, those folks that have sort of been hiding in the shadows and doing, sort of ducking and dodging of these requirements are at an impasse. And the question for them is, are they going to really make that investment and make that focus to maintain this as a priority for their company, or they're not going to be eligible for these contracts? And really what we're going to see over 2025, in my humble opinion, is a put up or shut up. It's going to be that business owners, both small and large, and boards of directors are going to make the decision: are we in on the defense industrial base and that portion of our revenue, or are we opting out and leaving that revenue on the table for somebody else to grab?
Yeah. Well said. So, Alex, and or Scott, given this, how are you advising the CEOs of your customers, around what to think about for next year?
Yeah, I can jump in first. We're certainly seeing a few trends. We're seeing DIB customers have started with a few things, right? They've done self-assessments. They've engaged with consultants for gap assessments. We're seeing some customers migrate to government cloud versions of products, or they're engaging with MSPs and MSSPs like RADICL. And we're seeing some RFP and buying activity. But in a lot of cases, we're seeing folks put remediation efforts on pause, right? They haven't taken that full step to close the gaps and fully prepare for an audit. So they're holding off on making those, sort of key changes until they absolutely have to. And I think to Reagan's point, we're sort of at that impasse. So that's what we're talking to customers about, is just sort of driving the urgency. And then, to the folks that are sort of on this presentation, we talk to customers all the time that are just at the beginning of understanding what CMMC is and where to get started. So if you're in that boat, don't worry, you're not the only ones. But, now is the time, as we start to see later this year, rules become live and then actually implemented into contracts going into next year. The time's now.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to build on that one as well. So, as we engage with companies that are looking to go down the CMMC journey, there's a couple things that we typically see. One is this concept that they think that this is like a one-time project. They kind of fail to understand that once they get into this is cultural, right? This goes on for a long time. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. And oh, by the way, once you're on the treadmill, you're always running it. The second part of it is that it takes time. If you haven't done some of the base things and you need to elevate to meet the CMMC requirements, it can take some calendar time to actually induce that change and get through the project of it. And there are ways that you can systematically step through the journey to get towards compliance. And, we can make an argument, every organization, fundamentally needs email to do business. And hey, why don't we go get your email into that, that GCC or that CMMC compliant space, right? You already needed email anyway. So how about we go fix that now? And then at least we're taking the steps. So it doesn't have to just be like we have to do everything in a day. We can work through it, but you need to start today, because if you are at the back of the pack and all of a sudden you get pressed up against, oh my gosh, I can't bid on this contract. We as MSPs and MSSPs and Matt as the C3PAO, our calendars may be full. And we may not be able to get to you in time because you procrastinated. And unfortunately, we would love to help out, We just already made commitments to other places. So, we're always pushing our customers. Can we at least do something? Can we start somewhere that looks different between company to company? But we need to get on the journey. We need to start going. I think we're far enough down this road. We know darn good and well this is not going away. It's here. It's published. It's go time, kind of Reagan's point on it. So can we please at least start doing something?
It seems like CMMC, could and likely will drive a shakeup within the DIB from just a competitiveness perspective. Any thoughts on who will win and who might lose, and what the cost of losing might look like for a CEO?
I'll jump in a few seconds. I think one point that was brought up was a cultural change, and I think that's the intent of CMMC, and I think that's exactly what Scott was saying. Is it's back to the cyber hygiene days, and hey, my password's 1234. That we had to culturally change. It's the same thing with how we implement CMMC, and that is it's a culture change in a company from the CEO on down to the most junior person out there that has a workstation inside the company, and he clicks on a link that he has no idea where it came from. I mean, those are the things that, over time that the cultural change has to happen. I think what's going to happen is, if you hear Bill LaPlante talk and the AS for DoD, he talks about supply chain intimacy as understanding your supply chain. I think the government's going to look for these supply chains to understand each other. And I think, it's going to be a case where if you look in the second, third, fourth tier, the smaller companies with the big primes, or even the small companies as primes and other companies in the supply chain, it's going to be a level of confidence and intimacy with that supply chain. If you know that they have this covered, if you know that they have a culture of CMMC, you're going to get them on your supply chain. You're going to offer more opportunities across the board in DoD work. And I think that's because the government can't do it all. That's why they're frankly, that's why they're building CMMC. That's why NIST 800 was around, was to get companies to abide and to understand this cultural change that they'd have to do. So I think it's going to be a level of confidence that you meet the CMMC requirements, C3A. I mean, if you cover that, then there'll be more and more confidence that you can meet your obligations in that supply chain. So I think it's going to be a confidence and a culture change.
I would agree. I think that what we are seeing, it's not going to see, but what we are seeing is the largest market opportunity that's ever been created in the history of the defense industrial base for market acquisition. I think that you are going to have companies that will decide to opt out. I think that you will have companies that will become ineligible to their chagrin and to their surprise. I think that in my experience with DTC Global's clients, we've had probably an average of 20 to 25% above top line revenue growth with regard to clients meeting these requirements and then aggressively engaging the contracting officers, their suppliers, those prime customers that they work with, and in saying, look, we handle your data. We're meeting these requirements. We're not dodging the 8-ball here. We are ready. And you're going to see an intensity from the prime contractors all the way down to the lowest tier of a sense of desperation in bringing together teams of suppliers that actually meet requirements. And that's, the DoD understands this. And it is for better for worse, it is a necessity in order to secure our supply chain that there be sort of chlorine in the gene pool, if you will. There has to be a proving or a purge within the defense industrial base supply chain of those that are willing to do what it takes to meet requirements and secure the data, or those that are not. And that's really going to boil down to simple eligibility, contract eligibility. And there's a unique aspect to both the rule and the 7021 contract clause, which is a duty to report. And in the previous, what we've had is a passive sort of, well, you said that you were that you were compliant whenever we last checked. But now, underneath the 7021 rule, there's a duty to report when you are not compliant. And so that ineligibility is going to be your responsibility to tell whomever you receive your contract from that we are not eligible. We do not meet requirements and we cannot receive your contract. And that is going to be an ugly layer that's going to reveal itself as people's maturity and understanding of these requirements comes really to pass in 2025.
That's a great illustration of why CMMC is a cultural shift, and a mindset than a continuous operations shift, just in how companies need to think about running their business going forward. Well, let's shift topics, move on to the next area, talk about some challenges as well as solutions in achieving CMMC compliance. So to kick it off, we did a survey of the DIB earlier this year, asking about maturity and across a number of practitioners within defense companies. And at that time, only 13% said they would see themselves as being CMMC level 1 compliant ready. That was a little shocking, given that's a pretty low baseline. I guess, first off, what do we think are why there's been such slow progress, or maybe this has gotten better, or, what were the challenges with doing better than that 13% of kind of the minimum baseline of level 1 compliance?
Yeah, I think ultimately the problem has been, and it's a good problem, the length of time that it's taken to get CMMC going. While as taxpayers, we want that. We want the government to move slow, but that has also created a lot of cultural resistance. And, we're going to wait and see until when this really happens. I've kind of coined it as, everybody who went ahead, who've gone through the JSVAs, they're the really, truly early adopters. We're now starting to see the companies are saying, hey, I want to get certified in that first quarter as kind of an early adopters. Once I think 7021 hits and it now becomes real reality to them, suddenly all the people are holding onto the fence with their finger. They're going to let go and start moving. Once 7021 gets published, it's now that fence is going to fall down and there's going to be a mass stampede and panic, not only for everybody that as soon as they start to lose contracts, they're going to realize they start to lose business. I got to deal with this or I need to get out. But it's also the primes coming down and putting pressure from the market side outside of DoD's contracts, because they can add the DFAR 7021, they can add CMMC compliance prior to they even getting it. So that's something that a lot of the smalls are already see that pressure from their primes. Like Regan said, 2025, 2026 are going to be very stressful, life-changing events for many businesses.
To add to that, in addition to that sort of wait and see element, I think cost is also somewhat of a barrier, right? And what we've noticed is the ecosystem that supports the DIB is responding to the challenges created by CMMC and sort of realigning itself to support DIB organizations with offerings for advisory consulting services, managed services, purpose-built technology. All of those categories continue to grow in breadth and depth, and that variety of choice will help companies accelerate their CMMC journey and allow for a more ideal fit for individual companies based on their unique environments and, potentially drive down costs ultimately. So I think, sort of this scaling up of the industry supporting the DIB is a good thing. I think I say all that, but then I'll also say, the security requirements for CSPs and ESPs, we'll definitely see the cream rise to the top in terms of who's really investing in supporting the DIB long term. And I think, everybody should really make sure as they're evaluating providers that they're finding good, committed partners that are committed to CMMC and the defense industrial base in the long term.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on this one too. So, when we're working with a lot of defense industrial base, we do hear quite a bit about, wow, this is really expensive to go do this. What's often missed is if you don't do it, your opportunity cost to be able to bid on the contract, but also, what is the risk to your organization if you're the one who had sensitive data compromised, right? You're the source to it. That has a fundamentally huge cost to it. And I just don't think that, the folks easily understand or the magnitude of what, a compromise looks like, or if you're the one who's leaked sensitive data, the risk and all the negativity that comes from that. And that's a hard thing to understand. So when, we do get into that cost conversation, yes, there is, yes, I get it. The firewall's more expensive and you have to do these things with laptops, which means you might have to buy a better laptop. But if you actually understood the other cost, you would understand that this cost is actually pretty darn low to go exercise on this.
And,
Yeah,
and
I'd like to jump in as well, Chris. I think one of the challenges, I found this when I was at NDIA, is, as I said at the outset, this is hard. I mean, cybersecurity is hard and it's constantly evolving. It's incredibly dynamic. And frankly, leadership in a lot of these companies, the C-suite and the higher level folks don't fully understand it. I mean, it's hard for your average person to understand, and especially at the level the adversaries are working today. When I was still in uniform, and this is not a pejorative use of the word, but I used to tell my operators, you need to speak geek, and geeks, you need to speak operator, because you don't know what risk you're taking. Going to Scott's point, company CEOs and COOs, they don't know the risk they're taking because they don't understand it well enough. And so that's where you really got to get to the point where the leadership in the company speaks geek, and they understand it to the level that they know the risks they're taking and they're willing to take. And in today's world, the risk is enormous, but it's not well understood, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, agree. I think we think of the cost equation when, I personally looked at the challenge, that, this segment faces. The SMB segment was most concerning to me because I spent my career in cybersecurity. I know it's hard. I know it's expensive. It's really hard to do really well, and it's expensive to do it, really well. And it is a continuous, ever evolving journey. There is no single product, no single thing you can do. It is a collection of things. And the SMB segment is the one I looked at as like, that's a tough problem, honestly, for these particular companies, given that they do have a class of adversary that is extremely well equipped when you're talking about nation state level, cyber espionage. How can SMBs particularly think about the costs, of traversing, this CMMC journey?
Well, most of what we do at DTC Global is we sort of pick up after people have invested a lot of money not getting compliant, right?
Yeah.
And the challenge with that is that there are lots of uninformed decisions. And, one thing I'm grateful to, folks on this call, other plank holding technology providers within the CMC ecosystem, is that being able to educate the consumer to making an informed decision about what their technology contributes to the fight in terms of their security, their general security, but also in terms of compliance as well. And by having a better informed decision, we'll have consumers out there that are they do not print their own money. They are making a decision when they spend $1 on one thing, they cannot spend it on another thing, right? It's gone. The money's gone and it's invested. And the hardest part of really my job and my journey is to tell people when they invested poorly, when those investments and that time and the labor and the technologies or providers that they've invested in had not gotten them where they thought that they should be. And I tell you, that is a very difficult thing to do. And so I think that part of the maturity of the ecosystem and part of really our job is that training education function, is explaining to people about the choices that they make and making an informed decision, and telling them where their money is going and what it's going to gain them in terms of both security and compliance, right? Because no one wants to be compliant and not secure. I mean, we're wasting our time, right? That's just a checklist. So as we make our choices in consultants, as we make our choices in technology, we make our choices in services like Simple Helix, we have to know that those investments are well spent, and that the other side of that is that we're going to spend that dollar once, we're going to do it the right way the first time, and out of that we can get back to the focus of our business, which is providing goods and services to in terms of our national security interests, and winning contracts and expanding the growth of our companies. So that, to me, is really the challenge that we face in terms of just not providing those services and enabling those informed decisions, but equipping people to make those decisions and do it well.
Absolutely. So, sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Well, I was also going to say, I think Alex hit the very good term here, opportunity cost.
Yeah.
And when we're working with companies, we're letting them know you have a choice. You can invest now. This is the cheapest point in time for you to invest. Because here's the problem that's going on. C3POs, we're standing up. We're grabbing all the CCAs, all the expertise are going to get sucked out of the ecosystem. Suddenly, there's going to be less people for Regan, for everybody else on this panel to reach out and grab onto to help to consult. Well, that suddenly means their services, they're fighting with less supply, but more demand.
Yep.
Prices are going to go up. If people look at this as an investment now, plan this out as an opportunity cost against the risk of by when they want to get certified against losing work, they can be smart and savvy and plan this out over the next year to 18 months. Waiting for the last 3 months in a mad scramble, I can pretty much, Alex is going to say, yeah, you want us to come in and get you fixed. That's a premium rate. You're probably paying double our rate because now I got my people working overtime because you created a problem you want me to fix. And we don't care about your culture. We're going to break everything. And what works afterwards, that's on you. Just, yeah. And that's what's going to happen this next year for a lot of companies.
That's a really good point. Is not only will it get more expensive, but if you have to jam this thing in because now you're under duress commercially, it is going to be it could break your culture, and severely damage it. So I hadn't even really thought about that, but that is an interesting perspective in terms of why also start early so that you can culturally adapt at a pace that's manageable versus having to jam it in at a aggressive, potentially, culture breaking pace.
And that blame DAU of Defense Acquisition University for that one, pounding that into my head, because the cost to do something and a bolt on afterwards, you're paying 2 to 3 times the cost versus doing it up front, doing it smart, and doing it savvy. So plan now, plan 12, 18 months, look at it as an investment, get a line of credit, get a loan, and get moving on.
Yeah, like that.
I think that's a great point as well. The other thing I'd add to that is when you talk to the DoD contracting officers and you talk to DAU is a great example. They do great in teaching these young contracting officers. But frankly, it's like most of the human race is this way. The contracting officers are looking for an easy button. They want to be able to hit the easy button. And if you're, hey, I'm going to get there. I haven't done it. I'm talking to these, the people that go, hey, I've engaged, I've invested, I have the capability, I'm certified. And so the contracting officers are going to go, giddy up. I'm going to take that one because that's the one that I know is done what they're supposed to do. Plus, it's the easy button for me. And I think that's a big factor for, DoD is what DoD is.
And any other thoughts for the CEO who says, I want to be a winner on this, get ahead of it and make it a competitive differentiator versus being left behind.
The irony is that's true. I mean, think about this. We've had this requirement since December 31st of 2017, really, the deadline, right? But you can still gain competitive advantage over the next 12 or 24 months by doing it aggressively, smartly, and with a sense of priority and urgency, and be positioned well. That is really ironic, right?
Yep.
But that can be done, and you can gain market share. I used to tell my clients by stealing the lunch money, but now you can gain market share by stealing the whole dinner, right? From your competitors, because there are going to be the haves and the have-nots are going to be standing there. It's going to be a 1 or 0. You are eligible or you are not. You can pursue the contract or you cannot, and it's really going to be that simple.
Yeah, and I want to jump in there too with, the customers that we have that have taken this seriously. They looked at it like, at first there was this big brother thing and I'm getting this imposed on us. After we've been through everything, I was actually trying to dig through our ticket system, but our customers who are now been through a JSVA and passed, they're just IT like tickets on just having problems and stuff is substantially lower than the folks that haven't gone through it, right? Because, we matured their IT infrastructure. And guess what? Their business is able to better scale. They're not having the security problems. We're not having we're not having, an engineer down for 2 days because they got infected by a virus and we're having to re-image their PC and all those things. Like those things all make your business better. And like I said, I was trying to dig through to try to get a hard number real fast, but it actually really does make your business better. Right. And so you can kick and fuss and try not to do it, but at the end of the day, you're going to be better from it. So embrace it and reap the rewards of being, a more stable organization with a more stable infrastructure that is already ramping you up to scale your business. And that's the kind of stuff that gets us super excited to say, hey, let's go.
I think that's a good message, that yes, there will be there's a change that will happen and needs to happen operationally and culturally. But when that change is digested, there's operational efficiency and time to be recovered. And I think that's an important message to you that actually I think more need to talk about, honestly, and see us to better understand. Well, let's talk about where we see CMMC moving forward. Obviously, there's a lot to do just with where we are right now. However, CMMC is likely to keep adapting over the next couple of years as it's rolled out. Any thoughts on adaptations that we might see in the nearer term, 1 or 2 years out, as it is rolled out across the DIB?
I'll jump in here
please,
with one thing I think that CMMC is going to have. We talk about IT and OT, right? Operational technology and information technology, and people generally talk about their networks. And most folks are pretty concerned with the IT portion of it, losing data and things like that. I believe if you look at companies and you look at the manufacturing process in this country and the automation that's going to continue to increase and how they do automation, whether it's self-driving cars to self-driving taxis and everything else, I think CMMC is going to have to increasingly take into account the operational technology and the automation side of it. And the famous quote with your Apple is, hey, they updated X number of times a month or X number of times a year. Well, those updates come from somewhere, and we all know what happens when an update goes wrong. And if somebody can start attacking those, you can have an increased problem. So I think the evolution of CMMC is going to continue to dive deep into IT, but they're also going to have to adapt to the OT part of the manufacturing process and the update process kind of across the DIB.
Yeah, to amplify that with the regulatory process, we see with the imminent release of the FAR CUI rule, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, that's going to impact every single federal contract and subcontractor all across all federal agencies. So not only I would amplify General Carlisle's comments that this is going to expand certainly to the depth and breadth, and I absolutely see that from IT to OT. You're going to see this expand across all federal contracts, all federal agencies and subcontracts, because we cannot afford to leave a nation state supply chain insecure. And so I think that when you look at this, there is this steep learning curve. But I am actually energized by the fact that American industry solves hard problems. This is what we do, right? We put people on the moon, right? This is what we do, and we can do this. We must do this. So it's time to do it. And so I think that we have to lean into the river that's surging, not lean away from it. And in doing so, turning towards our shield towards the storm, it's a factor of life, and it is time to do that, and it's time to do it well, and it's actually time to thrive instead of seeing it really as a liability and a risk and a sense of compliance vulnerability, is really just turning into it and seeing it as business opportunity and market expansion.
And adding to that, beyond the spread or influence, going into the all federal contractors, think about foreign governments as well, with the Canadians releasing their version of CMMC that follows the same set of controls, the United Kingdom talking about it, Japan. So, the sort of the global nature of CMMC could continue to expand. And then if you think about like FedRAMP's trajectory, right, this could expand into state and local governments or other critical infrastructure sectors, so that in sort of all facets of business, there's a supply chain cyber program requirement that's very similar to CMMC.
I mean, it's even, I think everybody hit it. It's going to go into all of government, right? It's going to DHS, Treasury, Commerce, state and local, I agree, and international. So look at AUKUS and what's going on with that, with the UK, the US, and Australia, Five Eyes. The other thing, I think in our nation today, it's not whole of government, it's whole of nation. Economic warfare is a big player. We know the adversary are pacing threat in the People's Republic of China. Everybody is vulnerable. There's not an industry or a company in the world that's not being hacked by nation state, not even considering the criminal threat. So cyber is here to stay. It's the genie you can't put back in the bottle. It's a domain that is asymmetric and kind of levels the playing field, and it covers everything. So I think the expansion of CMMC is a given, and it's probably going to be pretty rapid increase in demand signal, just because of the challenges we face across the spectrum, from nation state, non-nation state terrorists to criminal activity.
Absolutely. Any thoughts on how level 3 might come into play? It feels to me like most of the talks around level 1, level 2. I look at level 2. It's that's a good baseline, but it is, if you're talking about nation state class cyber threats, advanced APTs, level 2 is not going to get you there. You got to go beyond that. How do we think level 3 might play into this down the road?
So what we're experiencing, what we've recommended, is we've helped clients go through. I've had calls from Army CIS and NCIS, not Air Force OSI, which is kind of bad as ex-Air Force, kind of miss hearing from them. It's all been around command and control systems, war fighter systems, space systems. Those are the ones the counterintelligence communities within those criminal investigative services are hyper-focused on. So those are the entities that we're giving everybody those warnings. If you're in those spaces, intel, et cetera, expect to be level 3. Expect to start leaning in, prepping, taking a look at the requirements from 172, and start implementing them as soon as you can.
The other thing I think is just giving the back doors to some extent. I think CMMC over time, talking about the evolution, level 3, I think level 1 and 2 are going to move closer to level 3 just because of the way the adversaries are attacking us, and the criticality of even commodity level items. I mean, JADC2 and things like that, space systems, command and control systems, fully understand that. But the ability to affect things on a lower scale that have pretty drastic effect is going to drive the requirements up. As the evolution happens, I think across the board, level 1 and 2 are going to become more and more all-encompassing, and probably get kind of collapse closer to level 3.
Yep, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we've got about 5 minutes left. I'd love to give everybody in the panel, a chance to, to kind of give to give one key takeaway, where if you had a buddy who's a CEO of a company and they said, hey, what's one thing I could do to streamline and CMMC compliance and get moving on it? What would be the one piece of advice you'd provide them? And we'll let everybody give their piece, their one piece. Matt, you want to start?
Sure, I got one. So let's talk external service providers. DoD transferred the risk of their compliance fully and 100% to you. They're not required to be certified, but they shall be, and that is, 10 commandments shall be assessed by assessors like me if they're in scope. Unless they're certified, then you can inherit that certification. If they screw up one of those requirements and it's one that you're not conditionally eligible for, you're not conditionally eligible. You're not going to get certified. You're going to lose the contract. Be very, very careful about the external service providers you're bringing in to help to support you. Use the people on this panel. Verify that they're actually doing the stuff that they're saying they're doing. And in a perfect world, get certified external service providers. It is to your benefit and your risk reduction when I come to town.
Like that. So Matt, to paraphrase, good news is you can transfer the risk and the compliance requirement to external providers, but just got to make sure they themselves will be at the same level of compliance as you need to be.
Well, you can only transfer the risk if they're certified. If they're not certified by a C3PO, there is no risk transfer. And this is per the DoD procurement toolbox. That OSC is ultimately responsible if their external service provider fails to meet one of the security requirements for the services they're offering.
Roger. All right. Regan, how about you?
I would say that the takeaway for the CEO is, like every facet of his or her company, is that you need to choose very wisely whom you seek wise counsel from. And with regard to understanding that this is a whole organization effort, and that if you think that this is a IT problem and an IT project, you are destined for failure, and that the entirety of the organization has to be aligned with a sense of urgency and priority and senior executive advocacy for meeting these requirements. And this can't come from the CIO or your IT director, because they do not own the data. It is your stakeholders who perform the contracts that own the data. And so choosing wise counsel about how you're going to meet these requirements is, to amplify really Matt's comment, is that choose whom the services that you secure extremely wisely. People who have invested their time and treasure, like folks like Simple Helix, that have really invested their time and treasure in understanding these requirements and delivering the services that will get you both compliant and secure right the first time. So that's exactly what I would tell them.
Thanks. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, sort of building on that, that this concept or theme that, decisions about what to buy or who to work with from a service provider perspective are extremely important, right? How do you fill those gaps? It's costly, it's time consuming to bring in a new provider, bring in a new consultant to implement a new technology. So you got to get it right the first time. If folks need help, Carahsoft, in our sort of perspective as a master aggregator and distributor of a number of different technology providers, we can help guide through available options and help folks make decisions that are best suited to meet their unique needs. So feel free to engage us. We've got subject matter experts that can help.
That's great. Scott, how about you?
All right. So as one of the service providers that does take this very seriously, one of the things that I would say is that you need to make sure that you do at least stay involved with the compliance effort. So, I probably on one call a week where I talk to a CEO that just says, "Hey, Scott, I want you to be my MSP. I want you to handle 100% of this. It's all on you. You go make everything happen. And I never want to hear about CMMC ever again." And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. When Matt shows up to do the audit, they're auditing the organization. Yes, absolutely. I am responsible for a subset of controls, and there's certain things that I am responsible for, but the owner of the business is accountable for the whole thing. So you got to at least understand enough. I will say one of my biggest surprises when we went through our first customer going through a JSVA was that the auditors did not talk directly to me. They talked to the business. If the business, needed a question answered that I was responsible for, I had to facilitate that and help that with the point of contact at the business. That business turned around and talked to the auditor. The auditor talked to me as the MSP directly as to what was going on within that organization. So, definitely you have to stay in tune with the journey as you go.
That's great. Well, General Carlisle, we'll give you the closing remarks.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure, given I've brought the IQ of this whole panel down a little bit, I'm sure, because I don't understand near as much as y'all do. But I think that point is well taken. And I reiterate what everybody said. It's that CEOs, COOs, the leadership, the C-suite people, they have to become cybersecurity experts, but they got to know what risks they're taking. They got to understand what it means. They got to talk to people. They got to get as broad a knowledge as they possibly can, because the risks are huge out there. And if you don't understand them, it's going to cost you. And in fact, going back to the C3POs, the certifiers, the contracting officers, if the CEO talks the talk and walks the walk, it's going to make a difference in your ability to win those contracts and to be certified. And then the only other thing I'd say is there's, I use the term economies of scale, which isn't exactly right, but the more information you can get from the attacks that are occurring across the spectrum, the ability to have as much info as you can to know where it's coming from, who the actors are, what the techniques are, the more and more you get to that level of a vast amount of information, the better you are to prepare to defeat it, to detect it, defeat it, and in the quickest time possible. So, the risk benefit discussion that every company has and understand they have to have. CEOs, C-suite leadership need to understand what the real risks are here, because they are larger than I think most people will ever acknowledge. And again, it's great to be on the panel. Appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we appreciate it. Yeah, thank you, General Carlisle. Thanks, Matt, Regan, Alex, Scott. I think this has been a great exchange of knowledge and experience and insight into the state of CMMC. And those who attended, thanks for your time, and we hope it helped. Have a good and prosperous CMMC journey ahead. Have a nice weekend, all.